So we're starting this morning's service with Let's Talk. So I do have a couple of questions and from our webinar subscribers, and also something else that I think it might be nice to talk about. First of all, the talk this morning is going to be about psychic energy and changing certain patterns. So this one question has to do with that. Here's the question: do many traditions, routines, habits all aid in creating patterns that develop into obstacles on our path and hinder the assimilation of psychic energy? XO. Okay. First, I think it's important to understand what psychic energy is. In the Agni Yoga teachings, there is quite a focus on psychic energy, and we have a compilation of about 400 pages that define and talk about psychic energy. So trying to define and explain psychic energy in a nutshell is not easy. Perhaps as a foundation to our understanding of psychic energy, we can think of it as primary energy. Without this primary energy, there is no life. So the more psychic energy we have as a human being, the more life energy we have that is infused in our language, in our lectures, in our poetry, in our communications, and just the way we live our life. So the more of this primary energy, this psychic energy that we have, the more enthusiasm we have for our life, the more creative we are in our life, and the more contact that we have with the supramundane worlds. Okay, now why would these patterns create an obstacle to our psychic energy? The more psychic energy we have, the more of this primary energy we have, the purer our consciousness is. The purer our consciousness is, the more circulation of psychic energy we have. If we have created certain patterns that stop this flow of psychic energy, then we have to find what this cause is, which is typically certain patterns that we have developed, not just in this lifetime, but other lifetimes as well. So, as these patterns are changed, then the circulation of psychic energy increases and affects all the centers in our etheric body, particularly in the etheric body. So that's just the basic foundation of what is psychic energy. It's the primary energy that gives us life. Okay, and that also answers the other question. The other question I got yesterday, it was very challenging. It would be very challenging to answer that question this morning. It was from a very advanced thinker, and so it took me a while to put an answer all together, and so I just tried to answer it this morning in a nutshell, and I'll have to be happy with that. Okay. The other point I wanted to briefly talk about and discuss was something that I read in one of Helena Rourke's later letters to her students. And in that letter, she said how important it is that we protect our heart. So I read that and I thought, oh yeah, what a profound statement. How important it is for those in the work to protect their heart. And then later I thought, well, what does that mean to protect your heart? You know, it's one thing to say, yeah, that's really important, I get it, and I'm going to do it. Now how? So I began thinking about it, and the first thing that we need to consider and remember that our physical heart in our chest is just one thing. We also have an etheric heart, and our physical heart and our etheric heart support one another. Now, what's also very interesting is that we have a heart in our head, a heart center in the head, and this heart center controls our behaviors. But what I found as I was studying this yesterday in the teachings, it also affects our immune system. The heart center in the head not only affects our behaviors, it also affects our immune system. Okay, so further study. One of the greatest obstacles and negative influences we have as a humanity that affects our heart is noise pollution. Isn't that interesting? It has a deeper effect on our heart than even chemical pollution does. So that's one thing, is that we need to create a home environment that is not noisy. We need to live in a neighborhood that is not noisy. When we listen to music and TV and so forth, we need to keep the volume level at a level that the whole neighborhood isn't going to hear, or that your family that lives upstairs or downstairs is not hearing as you're watching and listening to, TV and hearing music. So that's one way to realize this is how we can protect our heart and our immune system. Another way is, and these are some things from the teaching, sound, audible and inaudible sound has a very strong influence on our heart. What is inaudible sound? Well, we have to think about that. Our thoughts, inaudible sound, the thoughts of other people being directed to us. See, affects the nature of our heart. Insecticides, various kinds of paint, and varnish devastate our nerves, the nerves that are connected with the heart. Chemical products, which fill our stores and print shops and paint stores and so forth, are detrimental to our heart. These things are very real. Now, Helena Rourke was telling us that for those that are in the work, especially need to protect their heart. So it's not just humanity in general, although ever since I was, in my 20s, I remember reading, and it's still true today, that the leading cause of death is heart attack. It still is. It's the leading cause of death, not cancer. Interestingly enough, it's the heart and heart attacks. But for an Agni yogi, for people who are engaged in service, in sacrificial service, for those who are walking and are dedicated to a spiritual path, this is what she's talking about, the one work. So think about these things. All kinds of pollution are detrimental to our health, but especially noise pollution. So when you think about our nervous system, and particularly the nervous system related to, oh gee, I just lost everything here. If you have any more questions, I can't see it on my iPad. So I was thinking about remedies, and obviously, you know, if you're going to consider taking this as a remedy, you're going to need to see your doctor or your, you know, your naturopathic doctor or your chiropractor, whoever you trust. But I've had to deal with this most recently, nerves that affect my heart. So I went into the teaching because this is my way, and I re-educated myself about valerian, and not Valium, but valerian. Okay, it's important, the difference. And what Helena Rourke suggests for the nerves of the heart is valerian tincture. And you can get valerian tincture from your local, hopefully your local naturopathic physician. Maybe Amazon, I don't know, I haven't checked Amazon. But she recommends that valerian tincture, you can take like 20 to 35 drops at least once a day. And once you start it, you need to do so consistently. In the morning, evening, if you're having more of this fiery energy than your body can handle. So, yeah, I can't get back. Okay. So that's what I'm trying, and it's made a world of difference for me. I noticed the difference maybe 3 minutes after I took it. Yeah. So if you carry a lot of Agni energy in you, that fiery energy in you, you want to try it out. But first, talk to your doctor, talk to your, you know, whatever medical professional person that you really trust, and see what happens. Okay. Are there any other questions from the webinar? Okay, great. So this morning I'm talking about psychic energy and breaking certain patterns. One of the rules of spiritual advancement and progress is that we must break the patterns in which we are experiencing, in which we are living, and then strive for something new. So if you're on the spiritual path, your goal is not to remain the same, but to progress, to advance. In order for us to do this, we are asked to change or to break those patterns which we have built since the time we were young, or since the time that we stepped onto the path, perhaps several lifetimes ago, where we were, you know, engaged in building certain patterns that were perfect for the times that we were living in. But those that are on the spiritual path are those who are eventually going to become our leading lights, our beacons of light. So such people want to break those old patterns to reveal advanced methods, advanced ways of living, putting our consciousness at a level where we can think in higher realms than what we did when we were a teenager, or patterns that we created in earlier lifetimes. So this is not necessarily such an easy thing to do, This is driving me crazy. But we're going to learn how to do it a bit this morning. See, I'm breaking this pattern. You can't look at me. You were going to look at this. You're so used to me being up here and moving my hand. So, anyway, so we're breaking patterns. If old patterns continue to exist in the etheric plane, in our nervous system and our brain cells, and echoing and re-echoing, they're going to reinforce this old structure of our moral and spiritual and physical makeup, which means we're never going to be able to advance. We're not going to be able to progress. And thus, we need to make a breakthrough. When we listen to music, and even the voices of people around us, to the radio and television, and even voices that we cannot hear, they affect us. Voices that we don't even hear, they affect us and build certain patterns in our etheric body. These patterns must be broken. New kinds of movement, thinking, feeling. See the movement? You are also distracted by what I was doing this morning, but that's good. And you'll learn why. We want new kinds of movement, new thinking, new feelings, new kinds of music to create a new pattern in our physical, emotional, and mental realms. For example, the first time I heard music composed and played by Torkim Saradarian, a great teacher, spiritual teacher, my ears didn't know what they were listening to. And my classical music training and education resisted those new sounds and the music style. When he asked me if I liked his music, well, I just looked at him. I didn't know what to say. And he just smiled and walked away. So it was then I began to slowly listen to his music, not with my educated and classically trained mind, but with my heart, where soon the music began to penetrate into my physical, emotional, and mental bodies, one at a time, until I began to understand the music. I learned that it was not only music composed from different modalities that I had never been taught, but from patterns that are found only in the higher mind. Only in the higher mind. The teachings indicate that before the unusual and special movements used in temple dancing were created, we fall into patterns that stay with us. So when I'm talking about temple dancing, I'm literally talking about temple dancing, but as I talk more this morning, think of dancing as the way you walk, the way you move your hands and your arms and your legs, the way you sit down, and so forth. These movements may look ordinary, but when they are combined with music and the right kind of thinking and visualization, a whole new combination results. Some of us, when we are engaged in some kind of a movement, whether it is lecturing, whether it is sitting or just walking, we have a rhythm. That rhythm is a kind of inaudible music that our soul is responding to in the supermundane or from the supermundane world. Perhaps your solar angel, you have a beautiful relationship with your solar angel, and that beauty, that love that radiates to you, to your soul from your solar angel, creates a rhythm. And that rhythm can be expressed in the way you sit, the way you walk, the way you speak, even when you're engaged in your day-to-day life at your job or with your child, or all the things we engage ourselves in at a day-to-day level. If we have that contact with our solar angel, with the higher ashram, with the master, the energy, that psychic energy coming to us from above creates a rhythm in our physical, emotional, and mental life that begins to break these old patterns. And once these patterns are broken, then we can advance in consciousness. Why? Because the psychic energy is circulating through all of our centers. The centers in the mental body, the centers in the astral body, and especially the centers in our etheric body. We have been fortunate to have a co-worker in this group that was taught Gurdjieff movements and dances, who now teaches these movements during classes at our WMEA conferences. Temple dancing integrates the physical, emotional, mental bodies. When these bodies are integrated by the use of music and dance movements, psychic energy starts to flow without creating any friction. Psychic energy comes from the core of our being, as well as from the sun, as well as from our chalice. So once we are integrated, slowly this energy flows to us from our chalice to be used creatively. One of the reasons for sickness, weakness, and illness is that psychic energy accumulates and it causes friction in our nature. It accumulates and creates friction in our nature. This is a fact that obviously methods of medicine and psychology have not yet observed. When psychic energy accumulates somewhere in the emotional or astral, etheric or mental bodies, when it accumulates, it's stuck there, it creates a friction. Unless there is a proper circulation. So dance and movement, music and thinking, color, and different symbolisms come together, they combine and together create a flow for a system that has, or wherever there is, congestion. And this congestion disappears. When the congestion found in the etheric, emotional, and mental body is removed, then the corresponding effect in the physical body disappears. Isn't that interesting? Temple dances were very sacred in India, in Persia, and Greece, and in the Aztec and the Mayan cultures. Ancient civilizations had various dances, the purpose of which was to integrate their physical, emotional, and mental vehicles. The process of integration opens channels for the circulation of psychic energy, energy that's coming from the higher self. When we move our hands, this is so interesting, it just blows my mind. When we move our hands, our feet, our head, something happens which is generally not observed. We touch the etheric web of the planet. Think about this. We're touching the etheric web of the planet, with the electricity which is in our body and in our hands. For example, have you ever, particularly during the winter time and sometimes in Arizona because there's no moisture, no humidity, you're walking along and you touch a doorknob. What happens? A shock occurs. Electricity exists in many levels, and when we move, we put that electricity into action. When a person moves, they touch the etheric web of the planet. The teaching explains that because we contain electricity, we create a phenomena in the etheric web of nature equal to the amount of electricity we expend. I know sometimes it just shocks me when I'll go outside to get into the car, and as I touch the handle of the car to open it up, we get shocked. I look around, how can this be? This explains what's going on. It's the amount of electricity that we expend then that creates that reaction to whatever we're touching, including the etheric web of the planet. If the electricity is coming from our physical body, the result obviously is physical, but it can also be emotional, mental, or spiritual. Electrical currents coming from higher levels cause us to fuse with the etheric web of the planet, creating far-reaching phenomena in the etheric web of the planet. For example, color changes into sound. Now, if you have a modicum of psychic ability, you can see flashes of this happening. Color changes into sound. So color can change into sound on one level. Sound changes into color in another level. See, this is what was happening when I was listening to Torgrim's music. But I didn't know it in the beginning. I just heard something very different, than what my ears were used to hearing. What is so beautiful is that as the color changes into sound and the sound changes into color, this attracts the attention of inhabitants on these various planes, that these changes are occurring. Like a call, and certain phenomena then produces a response. This is why and how we look at the paintings of Nicholas Rourke and we're just drawn into that painting. His painting is multi-dimensional. People do ask me, how do we contemplate the supermundane? It's one of the instructions from Master Moria, where he says, contemplate the supermundane. Well, what I'm sharing this morning about color and sound and inhabitants of various planes is the first step toward thinking about the higher worlds, contemplating the supermundane. When we contact the etheric web through our movement, we create an electrical phenomenon in the electrical field of nature, the result of which is equal to the power behind our movement, that we put behind our movement. Not everybody can necessarily see the colors and sounds they produce in this manner, because the frequency is typically beyond our ability to see and hear. But it does not mean that they do not exist. We are many times more sensitive than we know. So, have you ever sat in a room where there there wasn't any audible sound, but there was so much movement, so much activity taking place on the subtle levels that it affected you. Have you ever experienced that? I'm thinking, what's going on? Why am I on edge? Why am I anxious? You know, I don't have a sense of peace being here. What is it? It could be the thoughts, you know, of the people there. It could be we're being bombarded by ELF waves. We could be bombarded by crises that's taking place in the community. And because our sensitivities are increasing, it's affecting our aura. Isn't that interesting? It affects the etheric web of the planet, and we're reacting to it. So we are many more times sensitive than we know. Whether we sit or stand, whatever we do, whatever movement we make creates a corresponding action and reaction on the etheric web of the planet. Advises us not even to move our hand unless it is necessary. Not even to move our hand unless it is necessary. Whenever we move, we put energy into action. It's been observed that people move and act according to their level of consciousness and beingness. Advanced people walk and speak differently than the average person. There are poor people who can walk in the presence of great ones, and then there are people who feel paralyzed in their presence. This is all due to a different phenomena of energy. An advanced initiate radiates high levels of energies as they walk. They radiate high level energies as they walk, putting into action high level energy currents in space. Think about that. Their walking uplifts people and orients them toward higher aspiration. I remember sitting in the AEG Center in Sedona on a Sunday morning, and Torquem would get up from his chair and he would walk down the center aisle. And everybody would stop slouching. We would sit up straight, and we were so excited to hear his talk. Why was that? Because he radiated this high level of energy in his walk. Whatever energy a person radiates into space, they evoke a similar energy from space. Say, for example, there is a gnat or a fly on your head, and so with anger, we try to chase it away. Through such an action, we're radiating waves of imperil or irritation into space. And then space reacts to our movement with a similar force, which spreads disturbing effects in our environment and especially in our body. Imagine how poisonous and destructive are the effects of criminal actions, physical, emotional, and mental actions. We must understand that thinking and feeling and emotional expression and action all create a reaction or response from the electrical sphere of the world. We do not often care about what we do on such levels, but we are, and our life is the result, of what we do. It is possible to charge our physical actions or movements with various thoughts and feelings and enact them in various geometrical forms. So just think about this as you're walking through the day, or you're in a department store, Black Friday, getting the best bargains. Think about those geometrical forms. Each of them will create different results. We can further charge our actions with our looks and our voice and our facial expressions and create different results. We can further charge our actions with our looks and voice and facial expressions. I'm repeating myself to really think about this. We can further charge our actions with our looks, our voice, our facial expression, and then create different results. This explains how different kinds of dances affect a person's life, their future, and those who are in some way even related to us. So as a living being, we are a course of influence. We can influence people unconsciously or consciously. Any influence we make upon others is what we are giving to nature. And nature, in return, in kind, gives back what we have given to her. An orchestra produces a higher level performance if it has an inspired and enthusiastic conductor. The conductor, with their ability to interpret the music, charges the musicians with their inspiration and their enthusiasm, which helps the musicians play better and more powerfully influence their audience. So the conductor moves and directs the orchestra with their spatial movements. I don't have a baton here. There. If the conductor has no enthusiasm or does not understand the spirit of the composition that's being played, the orchestra is going to have a shallow influence or even a negative influence on the audience. On the way home from class last Wednesday night, I was listening to a pianist play a Beethoven piano concerto, the same concerto that as a violinist I had played in an orchestra several years ago. I'll never forget that experience. It was so riveting that I can still feel it today. The pianist, his name is Joe Sims, and he's playing this grand piano while we're playing in the orchestra. And as he's playing the piano, I can still feel the vibration. And he's that sweat pouring and throwing off. He was really, he was melting into the piano. And of course, the result inspired all of us. From cellists to violinists to piccolos, we were all inspired by the incredible performance and the psychic energy that this man was radiating. It was like my whole body seemed to be on fire, and not just part of the orchestra, because we were all one at that moment, but it was due to his performance. So I was thrilled to hear this music once again, but it wasn't soon after I was listening to the music on the Sirius XM. It was different. It was not there. I got bored with this piece of music that I just adore and love so much because of Joe Sims. What he did with his psychic energy. There is no energy, no psychic energy coming from that performer on the radio, so I turned it off. I was so disappointed. How could somebody take this beautiful concerto by Beethoven and make it boring? There is a tradition that says Jesus danced with his disciples at various times. And we wonder, what kind of movements did they make? What was their song, their chant, their music? How coordinated and harmonized they must have been. What kind of energies did they transmit to the planet? How did they affect the lives of millions? What fires did they kindle that burned so brightly, even to this day? Spiritual development is not based on any mental thought forms or knowledge, but upon the assimilation of energies, psychic energies. The Holy Spirit is not evoked by sermons and learning and discussion, but by devotion and dedication, aspiration and spiritual striving. These are gifts that are received as we harmoniously coordinate our entire being into the dance of life. Dance, I'm not going to get done with this. Let me see what I can do here. Well, I'll just see how far I can get. I'm going to run over. I guarantee you, run over in time, so there you go. So, dances and rituals and ceremonies speak to the heart. It is psychic energy coming from the heart which charges us, charges a group or a nation. When psychic, creative energies touch our heart, we begin to break certain old patterns. This is why meditation is so important. It helps us to break old patterns. Practicing virtues is a way to break these old patterns, because virtues attract psychic energy. Virtues purify us. The psychic energy then can circulate through our whole system, and we in turn use this energy creatively and to break old patterns. The destruction of a person or nation originates from degenerated dancing. This is a historical fact. When the dance practices of a nation become vulgar, why do you think the Indian tribes every year gather together and perform their dances? It's affecting and helping to break these old patterns. Isn't that interesting? When the dance practices of a nation become vulgar, stimulating the lower centers or creating disturbances within the centers, the teaching indicates that the nation slowly enters a period of widespread crime. People from the highest to the lowest office can fall into various criminal practices. Movement, dance, and music are given on a gradient scale. First, they are given to the body, then for the body and emotions, then for the body, emotions, and mind. Finally, they are given for the spirit in the form of sacred dances and sacred music, which nourishes the spirit and includes all others. Sacred dances and music change according to their purpose, to the level of evolution and the cycles of energy release. We must remember that dance and music are the result of movements of thought and emotions and speech and hands and eyes and face and gestures and so on. So knowing this, we can say that a lecturer is a kind of dancer. They are either graceful and coordinated and rhythmic, or they are chaotic. Observe people when they are talking. See how much gracefulness they have, how their thoughts and feelings and expressions harmonize and build a mysterious combination which we call gracefulness. Once there was a lecture given by a woman whose speech was so superb as far as her ideas and her analysis was concerned. Also, her rhythmic hand movements and facial expressions and manner of dress and hairstyle and makeup all composed like a symphony for us. When her lecture was over, someone told her that her performance is a supreme dance. And do you know how she responded? With this graceful smile. She didn't say anything, she just smiled with grace. If we can learn to be graceful, our entire life will gradually turn into a sacred dance. Dance and music and movement and color will be used in the future to strengthen people, to heal people, to enlighten them, and even create new senses in them. We read in history how kings used to have special dances performed to disperse their worries, to create energy and courage in them, to heal them, and to create psychic energy. To create psychic energy in these kings to increase their psychic potency or to release them from their mental and emotional problems. A cycle will come when specialized dance groups will perform a service for humanity. One day I invited a refined dancer to teach movement to some of our group members. She taught us balance and grace, how to move, how to think while we were walking, moving, and so forth. In the beginning, it was almost a comedy. But as each of us became focused and concentrated, it was like, the only thing I could compare to it was like sitting, pardon me, I've got a drippy nose. It was like sitting, all of the musicians sitting in an orchestra before we performed, and we were tuning, our instruments, and it was just plain chaos. So it was something like that. Until we started playing, and then that psychic energy takes over and it gets into our bones. And this is what happened as this very patient woman was teaching us about grace and balance and rhythm and movement. It was not too long before each of us began to walk with grace and beauty. So one of the supreme goals of sacred dancing is to expand our consciousness and create group consciousness within ourselves. Sacred dance, music, and intuitively controlled movements release us from crystallized patterns of energy, giving us freedom to expand and become more inclusive. Sacred dance, music, and movement are permeated with constructive psychic energy and instrumental in regulating us with the rhythm of the cosmic magnet. It is through psychic energy that humanity will be able to expand its contact with the cosmic presence. So that's it. I've just given us an introduction this morning to hopefully make us more conscious of ourselves and what kind of patterns we have that need to be broken.